All right, so we buried the lead a little bit, admittedly, because this is news that we did not expect to have to react to today. Thursday, February 20th, we get the notifications. We all got the notifications to our phone. Victor Wembanyama's sophomore NBA season is done after 46 games. Diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. That is a blood clot. He complained of some fatigue issues. The Spurs ran some tests after All-Star weekend, found the issue, will correct the issue, which is the most important part. That it could have been much worse. It might not have gotten detected. They found it, and that means he will be out for the remainder of the season. Not the first NBA player to be impacted by this. Asar Thompson came back from blood clots this year. I immediately thought of Brandon Ingram, who had a blood clot in his right shoulder 6 years ago. He was out for the offseason, and then he came back and made an all-star selection on most improved player the next year. So, the fact that it was detected, the fact that they're going to take great care of him and he should be back on the floor. The Spurs said there's no long-term concerns with him and his health is the most important part. And then the second thing is, man, it sucks. We do not get to see Victor Wembanyama complete what was going to be a great sophomore season, one of the best sophomore seasons ever. Playoff push for the Spurs is probably all but done. It's just a tough blow for basketball fans around the world.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, like after the initial news, because someone that big dealing with a blood clot, like Chris Bosh is someone that immediately came to mind, how that ended his career prematurely. And that's a player who I really think could have extended the back end of his career just being like a rim protector and 3-point shooter, because he was kind of moving with the direction that the game was headed in. And, you immediately get worried for a player like Wemby being as young as he is dealing with something like that. So it was refreshing to see so many validated reporters coming out saying we have it on good sources that, this is not an issue they're expecting to linger in next season. That's extremely important. That's immediately that was number one thought, okay, is Wemby going to be good long-term? And it's good that we kind of got that clarity, or at least it seems like we got that clarity right away. And then from there, I immediately pivoted to, all right, well, how did this sophomore season through 46 games stack up to others in NBA history? And, Wemby was only 8 blocks behind pace of becoming the first player since 1995-96. So in 30 years, essentially 29 years, to average 4 blocks per game. He was the first player in NBA history to average 3 threes and 3 blocks per game. He averaged the most blocks per game, 3.8, since Alonzo Mourning in 95-96. 98-99. And he actually had a 74 total block lead over the next closest person in the NBA. So, the guy averaged 24 points. He averaged 11 rebounds a game. He was, blocking shots left and right. The Spurs, the record was kind of lagging behind a little bit, but they had just gotten De'Aaron Fox, and it felt like they were going to be able to use the All-Star break as a runway to kind of, get those two accustomed together and hit the ground running for the second half of the season for a play-in or playoff push. Now it's, extremely unfortunate that it probably feels like we are 2 weeks away from De'Aaron Fox having a quote unquote lower back injury or something like that, where he gets ruled out for the rest of the season. And now all of a sudden, the Spurs are tanking again. And that's super unfortunate, because I think it was in our preseason pod that I was like, I expect the Spurs to win close to 50 games and be a playoff team. And were they on pace for that? No, they weren't, but they were on pace to be a play-in team. I was really looking forward to watching those two guys, especially with the addition of Fox, play in the playoffs together. But now, they're only 3.5 games out. I just don't know how much they're going to put the foot to the gas now that Wemby is out for season. It feels like it's more likely that they are going to start resting Fox, start resting CP3, and really kind of just shifting their focus to next season. But there's also a chance that, hey, maybe over these next couple games, De'Aaron Fox really pulls it together and they start winning some games. They're still in the playoff picture, and they decide, hey, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing to get this team some playing experience. So I'm curious to see how they approach the rest of the season. It just wouldn't shock me if they eventually start shutting guys down and focusing to 25, 26.
Yeah. First, when you talked about, when you said 50 wins, I remember that kind of got a reaction out of me. But I was like, you know what? They have a guy in Victor Wembanyama. And I had to check real quick. They won 22 games last year. They're 23-29 at the time of recording. So I'm cool with them just letting it go now, because the narrative stands. Chris Paul has helped another team increase its win total from 22 to 23 or however many they end with, I can say that he made them better as well. So that narrative goes on. This guy's in his 20th season. But to speak for, Wembanyama and what it means, the other thing that comes to my mind is history repeating itself, right? 96, 97, which was the year after somebody averaged 3.8 blocks per game. David Robinson only played in 6 games, missed 76 games. Spurs in the draft lottery. They get Tim Duncan. The rest, as they say, is history. I don't know if the Spurs will mail it in that much. I don't know if they can mail it in that much because of, the ground that they've made up this year. They do also have that Hawks pick. But, what if it would be unfair if they land Cooper Flagg? You know what I mean? But we have to have that conversation now because it's something that could happen now, right? And I don't know
who
else.
It's not impossible at all.
It's not impossible at all, So depending on how things shake out for them in the draft lottery or whatever, that's a real possibility if they aren't focused on playing in the postseason anymore. And thinking about other players, right? I was not necessarily forcing the parallels, but LeBron was another guy who in year 2 made his first All-Star game, and towards the end of his second season, it was wait, this guy actually might be better than every lofty expectation we placed on him. And also he's 20, 21 years old and maybe one of the best 3 players in the NBA. Exact same conversation that we're having about Victor Wembanyama right now, but LeBron didn't make the playoffs till year 3. So if that happens, then, the precedent, the tradition continues where this guy who is super hyped coming in the league brings his team to the playoffs in his 3rd season. And not only do they go to the playoffs in his 3rd season, they win a series and really make things happen. I don't necessarily know if they're capable of doing that this year. One thing I immediately thought about after that, right, the unintended consequences, and I said it, his second season ends after 46 games. You and I have talked about this before. Threshold for season-ending injuries to win in the season awards is 62 games. The threshold generally is 65. He's not going to get there. We talked about it. We've said it on here that Victor Wembanyama is going to be Defensive Player of the Year until he isn't Defensive Player of the Year anymore. And the one thing that we said would keep him from doing that is the minimum games played threshold. Now that opens that conversation back up to a Jaren Jackson Jr. or an Evan Mobley or a Lou Dort or a Dyson Daniels. And it gets really interesting when you think about that. I don't know if you've put any thought into what it kind of means for the rest of the NBA. It also kind of means things for the teams who are in direct competition with the Spurs in the standings. But, anytime a player who is one of the best players in the world is out for a long time for the season, the domino effect is just felt across the league and honestly kind of across sports too, because it affects college basketball now.
Yeah, absolutely. Wemby was the clear favorite for DPOY. And I saw that Jaren Jackson Jr. has jumped up to becoming the favorite for DPOY now. Dyson Daniels was the first person that came to my mind because, it took it was 27 years for a guard to win Defensive Player of the Year from Gary Payton to Marcus Smart. And
Marcus Smart.
That was only 3 years ago. So it's Dyson Daniels is right there. He has 50 more steals than the next closest person in the league. He's had an incredible defensive season, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Is he going to get the credit that he deserves in winning that award? It's really, really tough to win it as a guard. Jaren Jackson Jr. is having an incredible season, and in the same light, it also opens up an All-NBA spot because Wemby was almost certainly going to be an All-NBA player.
Sure.
So now, is Trip J a first-team All-NBA type player? Was Wemby a first-team All-NBA type player? He was probably knocking on the door there. Second-team All-NBA. You can kind of debate who belongs where. It feels like Shea, Jokic, Tatum, maybe Giannis are locks. Cat's working his way in there. Jalen Brunson, maybe. I'm trying to think of some other guys. Donovan Mitchell, maybe. I don't know. Who are knocking on the door of that first team All-NBA conversation. Then you got LeBron and whoever in that next tier. But Wemby was somewhere in that first and second All-NBA team discussion. So now that opens up a spot that, maybe somebody else is going to be able to step in and earn a higher All-NBA honor than they originally intended. But, as far as the Western Conference goes, it's one less team to play in that one of the higher seeds is going to have to worry about in the first round of the playoffs, because if they did get into the play-in and then ended up, kind of finding their groove with Fox and Wemby, now all of a sudden a team like OKC or Denver or whoever, Houston, Memphis, that should have earned themselves a pretty easy first round matchup because they finished in first or second in the West, would have had to face Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox in the first round. So, it does make things interesting there too. They're out of the playoff picture at the time of recording. Like I said, I think they're 3.5 games back from Golden State. It just, it takes the pressure off of some of those more veteran teams like Golden State, like Phoenix, that are trying so hard to like maintain their spot in the playoffs. And they had some of these younger teams kind of knocking on the door. Now they have one less team to worry about. So, that was major news for the rest of the NBA season today with Victor Wembanyama being ruled out.
Yeah, major news and something that we'll continue to talk about every time the Spurs are on TV and every time we're talking about the league and where things are going, right? Like thinking about DPOY and All NBA and the thought that I just had when we were talking, I was like, man, poor AD, right? Like he's out with the abdominal injury and he's talked a lot about never getting a fair shake at winning Defensive Player of the Year. I think he will have a big role as the Mavs defensive anchor, but we won't even know more about his availability for the remainder of the season for another few weeks. He's played in 43 games. If he comes back in early March, as he's expected to come back, the maximum he can play in is 61. So that one shot that he might have been able to have to mix together his body of work in Los Angeles and Dallas, just not going. And it's crazy. The only other time that's happened that I know of in my basketball knowledge, Dikembe Mutombo was traded from Atlanta to Philly and won DPOY that year, the year that the Sixers went to the NBA Finals. But probably otherwise unprecedented is a reason that doesn't happen very often.